We're going to talk now about importing data into our Tabular module. Access to tables or queries start with a connection to the data source. These will become our dimension and facts in the Tabular module. The fact and dimension tables are created and accessed with the same designer, unlike the cubes, which have the measures created in the cube designer and dimensions created in the dimension designer. When connecting to a table or view, it's a good idea to limit the columns to those that are requested from the end user. Limiting the columns in views at the database level is a best practice, especially for performance tuning. This is a good way to enable the tuning of the query to be done by, say, a DBA in the database rather than within the model. The columns are still available as attributes or measures if needed or requested later by a requirement from the end users. Queries can be used instead of a direct connect to the table or view, but using a view like an embedded query is still a better idea in the long run for performance tuning. Once you start to import tables, you will have some prompts and columns that can change the characteristics of the data. The friendly name column while importing data is used to make the labeling of report areas more appealing to the end user. The filter or preview option can be used to limit columns as well as data. Sometimes we want to give the user everything, when in reality, giving them only what they requested is the better option. Too much sometimes confuses end users, and then they never use the system because they think it's too complicated. Be sure to not remove the surrogate keys or keys that form relationships between tables from the dimension or the fact tables. They are needed to form that relationship. Otherwise, you won't be able to slice and dice attributes with their measures. They can be hidden later from the reporting tool rather than removing at the query level. To remove the columns not requested, uncheck the box in the header of each of these columns. There is also a drop-down arrow on the column header to filter data by column. This is what would become the where clause of the query, and it helps or assists in development. Later, when deploying to production, you could change the filter so all data is processed on the production level. Now let's look at a demonstration on importing data and tables into a tabular module. First, we'll launch the SQL Server Data Tools. Once the environment is open, we'll go to the File menu choice, Open, and we'll open up a previously created project with a data connection. Here we go to Tabular in the Solution, and now the Solution Explorer is open with our project, AdventureWorks DW14. In order to import tables, we have to go to the Model menu choice. We have two options. First is importing data from a data source, where you're able to create a new data source, and the other is an existing connection. We have an existing connection already to our AdventureWorks Data Warehouse 2014 relational database. We have two options here to either open or edit. So if we want to change the connection, we can do that here. If we want to get tables or write queries, we click Open. We're going to keep the selected from a list of tables and views to choose the data to import and click Next. Here we're given a list of the dimensions and fact tables in this data model. We also have some connections to some views. I'm going to make this window a little bit larger for us. And I'm going to scroll down to the fact internet sales, which is the first fact table we'll be working with. We have an option in the lower right to select related tables. If we click this, the foreign keys between that fact table and the dimension tables will show as selected. After we select that and scroll up, we're going to remove the promotion and the currency for now. The next thing we're going to do is look at the friendly name. Here we're able to take the dim off a dim customer. This makes it a little more appealing to end users when they're selecting attributes, hierarchies, or measures in a reporting tool. We'll do the same thing with date, the same thing with product, also sales territory. This gives you a good place in the beginning to make these changes. And lastly, fact internet sales. Now, the product dimension actually has relationships to dim product category through dim product subcategory. It didn't find that related to the fact internet sales, so we'll need to select those also. These are part of our snowflake schema in this dimensional model. We'll clean up the friendly name again, as well as for subcategory. Before we finish, what we can do is filter and preview what's going to be listed by these tables. The first one we'll look at is internet sales, and in the bottom right we'll click preview and filter. Here we're given a list of all the columns in that table. For instance, we don't need promotion key and we don't need currency key because we removed those references to the dimension table. But we do need the surrogate keys for sales territory, customer, the 3 date fields, ship, due, and order, as well as the product key. As we scroll to the right, we will see a sales order number and line number. That's the primary key of this table, which we'll keep also. We'll remove revision number, and we'll keep order quantity, but we'll remove unit price and extended price, as well as unit price discount and the discount amount. As we scroll further to the right, we'll remove the product standard cost, but we'll keep the total product cost as well as the sales amount. We'll also remove tax amount, freight amount, but we'll keep the 2 last columns, carrier tracking number and customer PO number. The other 3 fields towards the right are the actual order, due, and ship date. Since we're relating to a date dimension in this model, we don't need the actual date, so we'll remove those. Now, the reason we did this is to not clutter the environment while someone is reporting on internet sales. Later on, a user might request these additional columns, and we can easily add them back in our tabular model. We're going to click OK, scroll up a little, and we'll look at sales territory. Here we have the region, country, as well as the group, but we don't need the image for now or the alternate key. We'll unselect those and click OK. We'll go to product subcategory, and we'll see that we don't need the foreign names to these subcategories. But we do need the product category key, but we don't need the alternate key for the subcategory. We'll click OK and go to product category and do the same thing. We'll remove the alternate key and the 2 foreign names. The time you spend here will be well worth it later on. Usually end users do not want to see everything at one time, even though they might request this. Now with the date, we'll select it, and we're going to look at another option here. Once we remove day number of week, the English name of the day, as well as the Spanish and French, and as we scroll to the right, we'll see the fiscal calendar, which we do not need. We're just going to stick to the calendar, and we also don't need the calendar semester. On a column, while you're selecting this, you can actually drop down a filter. Here, you can filter out some of the years out of this date dimension if you know you don't have related data in the fact table. It also helps to reduce the number of records you're using while developing. Ours are not great, so we're going to leave them checked, but this is just an option that you should be aware of at this point. We're going to click OK, remove a couple other columns like the foreign names, and it looks like we'll keep the rest that's out there, and we'll click OK. Last is the customer. As we filter it, We can see we don't need something like title, middle name, the name style, some foreign names for the education as well as the occupation. Definitely need some of the demographics like house owner and number of cars, but we don't need the exact addresses or phone numbers or the date of the first purchase. We'll keep the commute distance and click OK. Once we have applied our filters, you'll see a link in the filter details, which you can click again to see what you've selected or edit what you selected. The last thing is clicking the finish, and we'll see the data to start importing. You might ask the question, why is it importing data? Remember, this is an in-memory technology, so it is reading the data in memory right now for faster processing, as well as once you make a change, the change is instantaneous. We'll close this, and what we're going to do before we continue is minimize our working environment, and we're going to open up Management Studio. Once we open up Management Studio, we're going to connect to the Analysis Services Tabular instance. If we drill into the databases, we should see a temporary database right now. And this is the one that's VentureWorks DW14 Thomas 2 with a GUID number. This is the in-memory database, and in the first section, when we told it to keep this in memory, it's going to keep that to make the changes as we move along. Once we deploy it, which we'll do right now, I'm going to minimize Management Studio, bring back up Visual Studio, our SQL Server Data Tools. I'm going to right-click on our VentureWorks DW14 and go to Properties. Here's the actual name of the database if we're to deploy it, and the instance to where do we deploy it. So I'm going to click OK, right-click the project, and click Deploy. So here you'll see that there's a temporary workspace database, and now as we process this, an actual database. So let's click Close, minimize this, and bring back up Management Studio. We'll right-click on Databases, click Refresh, and there's our VentureWorks DW14 database. Now that we've seen this, we're going to look a little more viewing area of SQL Server Data Tools. We'll close Management Studio and bring back up SQL Server Data Tools. The import is kind of like, once you do this, like Excel. Here's tabs, customer, date, product, product category, subcategory, sales territory, and internet sales. And this is what's considered the grid view. In the lower right, there's two icons where we can switch from the grid view to the diagram, which is a relationship view. Let's click that, and because of the foreign keys and the relationships, now we have a diagram of the tables as well as their related fields. So as I move this around to make it a little cleaner for our viewing, you'll see product is related to subcategory, and then subcategory is related to category. Also, we have customer, sales territory, and date related to internet sales. Now, with the date, you can see three different lines connected to internet sales, and that's for order date, due date, and ship date. There can only be one active relationship in a tabular module. If you wanted to change that, you could right-click on that relationship, mark as inactive, and then make another one active. You can also edit the relationship here. If we double-click a line, it'll bring up the relationship. And you'll notice too that you can only relate tables through one column. We'll click OK, and we can even delete one of these relationships and re-add it. So let's delete the relationship between subcategory and category, and then show how we can make a new relationship. It doesn't matter which side you pick. If I pick product category key from the subcategory to product category, the relationship will be created. If I went the opposite direction, we would get the same relationship. The tabular model is intelligent enough to recognize which table has the key value and which one is the related value.